Okay. Uh, so can you introduce yourself for my professor? Because my professor's gonna
Sure.
walk.
Okay.
Cool.
Hello, my name is David Steinfeld. I am 59 years old. I was born in Boston, and I am Allie's uncle, and I live in Rockville, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C.
Were you actually born in Boston?
I was born in Boston. Yeah. I lived there till
Okay.
I was, you know, uh, like fifth grade, fourth grade or so.
Oh, I didn't know that. I thought
Yeah.
for some reason I thought you were from originally from Kansas.
No, I graduated high school in Kansas. So
Ah,
I went to well, we'll probably get into it, but I lived in Boston, and I lived in Denver for middle school, and I was in Kansas City for high school.
that answers the first question.
Oh,
So,
okay, yeah, right. Where were you born? So I was born in Brookline, Massachusetts. So
oh,
basically,
cool.
Brookline is just Boston.
Yeah. And then like what year were you born?
1963.
63. You're only like a couple years older than my parents.
Yep, that's true. Yeah, I'll be 60 years old in May.
Nice. Where did you grow up though? Like, so you moved around a bit.
I moved around, right? I was a lot like you, where you'd say, "Hey, where'd you consider home?" It's like, well, pick. I was born in downtown Boston, and then my parents moved to Brookline, and then we moved to Beverly, which is North Shore, north of Boston. I lived
Mhm.
in Beverly for a while, until I don't know, fourth grade, whatever it was. Then I moved to Ohio for like a year and a half, and Dayton, Ohio, and then from Dayton, Ohio, we moved to Denver, Colorado, and then from Denver, Colorado, we moved to Kansas City, Kansas. And I was there until I went to college in Atlanta. Then I moved to Dallas, and then I lived in Maryland. So I was like all over the place. So as a kid, you'd say, "Well, where are you from?" I'd probably say Boston. I
Yeah.
lived there longer than most places, but you also could say Denver because when you're in fourth grade, that's when you're starting to make friends that last. You remember stuff, right? So
Yeah.
fourth
Like
grade
your
seems to
sentiment.
be right. You're not just you don't really remember what happened when I was five, but you start to remember things in fourth grade. And then high
Yeah.
school, I mean, a lot of people say, "Where'd you graduate high school?" That's where you're from. But when you only live in there for like 3 or 4 years, that's not considered where you're from. You and I are very similar, where you know all over the place. Where other people say, "Yeah, I lived in X city and I was there forever, and I graduated high school, and that's where you're from." But I mean,
Yeah. I always just tell people I'm from Louisiana because that's my parents like growing up, they always just told me like, oh, wherever feels most like home to you. So I've always
mhm.
just told people like Louisiana, but like it gets harder now because it's like really hard to explain to people that like I'm originally from Louisiana, but my parents live in Florida. And then they're all like curious about like all of the moves. So
hmm
yeah,
Same
I
with
can
me. And then the
definitely
first thing to ask you is, "Oh, is your dad in the military?" And
yeah,
they'll say,
always.
"No, he was a salesman." I said, "Oh, okay." The salesman and military seem to be the two that have to move all over the place.
Yeah. So like just what was your childhood like? Like moving around, that seems like really hectic. I can definitely relate to that. Like what were your parents like? You
Yeah.
have
Well, my dad was a salesman, so he was like never home.
yeah.
Because during the week he would always be out somewhere. He'd travel on Monday and Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it was, and sometimes he'd come back on Friday. So it was during the week I was raised by my mom, and she raised me by an iron fist. She was like drill sergeant. My mom would never ever smile, never laugh. She was just, she had three kids. She had a full of the house, so you were not allowed to be inside the house except for eating and sleeping. And if it wasn't for eating and sleeping, she doesn't care if you were playing in traffic, if you were out causing trouble, doesn't matter, but you had to just be out of the house. And then very specific times, you had to be home at 6 o'clock at night for dinner. If you weren't home at 6, then you just didn't eat dinner that night. You got up in the morning at 6 in the morning, just what you did. And if you missed breakfast, then you missed breakfast. But she expected you to, very much like the military, I would think. And my dad would come home on Friday, and then my mom would say, "Well, your dad's tired, leave him alone. He wants to relax." So at nighttime, even if he was home, you'd never see my dad because he just would relax for having tough day at work. But that was the way things were in the 60s and early 70s. You know, you got raised by your mother, your father worked, your mom sort of stayed at home to raise the kids, and you didn't bother your father when you got home because he was tired.
Yeah.
And then you sort of did stuff on the weekends. So the good thing about my childhood was we always would go on a vacation during the summer, like a 2 week vacation to a national park. My mom had always wanted to do that. So we'd get in a car and we'd drive to some national park, whether it be Yellowstone or Grand Canyon or something like that. Or I would drive to Florida to visit my grandfather in Jacksonville. So it'd always be not much during the year. And then you take like a 2 or 3 week vacation over the summer,
Yeah.
which, was good for me. I liked being outdoors. It was great. My sister hated it because my sister wanted to do was be with friends. And if you're hanging out with your parents on a family vacation for 3 weeks, she hated it because she couldn't be with the friends. Now you're lucky because at least you have cell phones and Twitter and Facebook and things like that. But back then, when you're away from your friends, you didn't hear from them, see them unless you want to write a letter. There's no email, there's no nothing. So, and you either had to write them a letter or you just didn't do it. For me and my brother was fine. For my sister, she hated it. So, different
Yeah, I
type of
can relate to that.
personality.
Yeah, I know what that's like.
It's like, so imagine you without any Facebook, email, or any of that sort of stuff. It's just the way it works.
Um, so you mentioned that like you had like specific times you had to be home and like your mom didn't really care if you were like out making trouble as long as you were like home. But did
Mhm.
you get into any like trouble growing up? Like what was the most trouble you ever gotten growing up?
Yeah, for me, almost never really got in trouble because the stuff I did, that was being, I was Boy Scouts was a lot of it. So between Boy Scouts and baseball, that was my childhood. Always doing both of those, Boy Scouts and baseball. So hard to get in trouble when you're doing Boy Scouts because you're off in the woods. You get in trouble, you just can't. And then with baseball, you just can't because your coach would kick you off the team if you got in
Yeah.
trouble. And then when you were in school, the coaches would make sure you didn't get in trouble. Because when I was in high school and also in middle school, we had things called eligibility cards. And if you wanted to play on the team, you had to go to every one of your teachers and you had to get them to sign every week your attitude and your grades for every class. So if you failed anything in any one class for attitude or grades, you couldn't play sports for that week. So the coach and the school made very sure that anyone who played sports, you had to be, a good kid as well as make good grades, or else you didn't play. So I
Yeah.
really never got in trouble. My sister got in trouble all the time. So
That
just
seems like a girl
constantly,
thing. Cause like
she was always grounded.
yeah,
But for me,
I feel like even though I played sports, I still got into a bit of trouble, like sometimes. But like
mhm,
again, there wasn't like there's not like eligibility cards, at least like not at my high school. So I wasn't really
yeah,
concerned about like what I was doing so much outside of school, just more so inside school. So
mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, when I would feel younger, I'd get not really bad trouble, but it would be something where my brother would, my brother was 5 years younger, so he would do like push me or something like that. I'd push him back. And my mom would get me in trouble because you say you're the older brother, you need to go know better. And then my mom would hit me a lot, so she would take this wooden, it's like this large, uh, I guess walnut brush that my dad would use to brush the suits. It was like a valet thing. It was like heavy and long, and she would lay me on the bed and she would just whip me with it, on my rear end. And then she would always say, "This is going to hurt me more than it'll hurt you," but it would hurt a lot. But that's how she would, discipline. But nowadays, I think you get in trouble for, you know, beating someone with a wooden, wooden brush, but it would
Oh
hurt. It was about like
yeah.
3 feet long, and she just whack you with it. So those were the day that's the way it worked back then. So you sort of learned, at least with my mom, you didn't want to get in trouble because the punishment was like real bad, and especially with the boys. My mom would never hit my sister, so all they would do is put her in, ground her, and
Yeah.
then you ground girls, you beat the boys. That's sort of the way it was. So,
So
and
you
my
had
mom was
like
scary enough where you didn't do anything bad.
yeah. So you just have the two siblings. I have
Yep.
one sibling, so I know what that was like growing up with him, but what was it like growing up with two siblings. Are you the oldest?
I'm the oldest, right? So my sister is like 2 years younger than me, but she was a girl, I was a guy. We never really did anything together, right? Because she had her friends, I had my friends, and just back then, boys and girls never really did the same things. Now girls can play sports and guys can do other things, and it's not weird to hang out together. But at least at my age, boys and girls did not hang out together unless you were like dating. So
Mm.
girls would never ever played sports. It just wasn't something they did. And guys would never hang out with the girls because that's not something they did. So totally different spheres of friends, spheres of things you did. And until you started going to high school and you started dating, but that would be the only time that guys and girls would get together again. My brother was 5 years younger than me. So we had totally different groups of friends. You don't hang out with kids that are 5 years younger than you, and he was too young to hang out with any of my friends. So I'd be in college when he was still in like middle school, so we never really hung out together. So yeah, I was very much on my own. All three of us were very different kids, but we all uh hang out with our own group of friends that we never interacted.
Hmm. It's really interesting because I
Yeah,
feel like
things were different.
growing up, like me and Josh, we hung out like all the time. But again, like we're the same age, so like most we had like most of the same interests. I mean,
Sure.
outside of anime, but
Right, but if you were my age you wouldn't have done that.
probably
Even though
not.
you were twins, you would have your friends, he would have his friends, and you would never have the same group of friends because you would never have guy friends and he would never have girl, you know, friends in a group. It'd always be separate.
Um, so how would you like as a whole, how would you describe your childhood? Like if you could, and if there's like one thing that you attach to your childhood the most, like what would it be?
I would say the one word would say independent. Your parents didn't really take an active interest in school. You went to school, you did your homework, you went to bed, you played with your friends, and your parents were there to make sure you had a house and would make sure there was food. But they didn't play with you during the week. They didn't check on your homework. They didn't help you with your homework. Uh, they didn't even know what grades you got until the report cards came out. And then I would get good grades. My mom would be happy. My sister would get awful grades and she'd get mad. And that's sort of the way it was. If you uh, and your dad was never home, so he never really took an active interest in any of the schoolwork. He just wanted you to make sure that you weren't causing problems, right? So I'd say independent was be very much the one word of my childhood and probably almost everyone else's childhood in the 60s. You played with the friends and you make sure you got up in time for school. That was all up on you to get up on time with an alarm clock and get on the bus. If you didn't, you're walking to school. Your
Yeah.
parent, my mom didn't have a car, so my dad had the one car, so he was using it to drive to work. So there was no way for me to get to school if I missed the bus. Just the way it worked, which was fine. you know, I don't know if it's, I think parents take more of active interest, which is good and bad. There's a too much of a helicopter parent is bad. Some parents really take an active interest and they're good. That's a good thing for you. For me, it was, why would your parents try to help you with your homework? That's what teachers are for.
Um, would you say that like when you were growing up, like throughout your childhood, like probably K through 12, big friend group, small friend group, like what was your friend group
Yeah.
like?
Yeah, I always had a very small group of friends. For me, I was always like the one friend. No matter what city I lived in, it was the one friend, and we hung out 100% of the time,
Mm,
all the time. And then it would be groups would be for sports. It was your sports would have a group, but you'd never see them outside of practices and games. And then anything else, you always hung out with the one friend. My brother had a big group of friends. My sister had a huge group of friends, not just the one. But for me, no matter where I lived, I always had like the one friend. And my mom would always say that no matter what city I lived in, she always remembered the one kid. And that's what we always did. And then when he moved, you never saw him again. And you have to meet another friend. And then you sort of latched onto that one. And then you were friends till you moved again or you graduated high school. So I'm not sure why it worked out that way, but We never worked well in a big group of friends. Didn't work.
Well, yeah, now you're an engineer, so that makes sense now.
Right. Yep.
Um, so how would you describe a perfect day when you were younger? It seems like it would be pretty similar to today because it seems like in your childhood you spent a lot of time in the wilderness and things, and that's like how you spend your time now. So
hmm
would you say that it would be completely different, similar? Like why?
I think it's similar. I mean, back then I always liked Boy Scouts and I always would go camping. And my dad grew up in a tenement in Boston, so he didn't know how to camp. He never camped. So he always would want to go to the national parks because he never saw them as a kid. But camping with your parents is different than hanging out with a group of friends in the woods, backpacking, and that's what I always did. So I'd say camping was my fun day. You know, baseball was always fun. I always liked to play baseball, did it all the time. Uh, and if I wasn't playing baseball because it would be wintertime or something like that, I'd be camping. So for some reason, being outdoors was always something I liked. You're never by yourself. You're always with a whole group of friends doing stuff. That always seemed to be more fun than being at home
And being alone.
and
Yeah.
being alone. Right. Yeah.
Um, when you were younger, what did you think your life was gonna be like? Did you think that you were gonna end up in the career that you are now? Like, what did you think you were gonna do?
Uh, well, when I was younger, I always thought I would want to do something like science and math because it was always like science related. And then when I was a young kid, I wanted to be an astronomer. You know, and look at stars and look at planets and do all that sort of stuff. And then a little older, I realized, well, if you're an astronomer, you're up all night and you sleep all day. So it's like, well, that seemed to be you're not going to get friends, right? If you're going to be an astronomer, astronomer is very much a loner type of job, and it's like, well, it's okay being by yourself. I don't want to do that for the whole rest of my life. So I thought about when I was in 10th grade. We had to find a job we wanted to do, and you had to ask a person to shadow them for a whole day at their work. And I
Mhm.
wanted to be a meteorologist. So I went from astronomer to a meteorologist. I said, I really think being meteorology would be fun because weather. As a Boy Scout, you're always outside. You always could tell, was it going to rain? Is it going to snow? Is it going to do this, that? I thought it was interesting to predict the weather. So I had to call a guy that if the National Weather Service in Kansas City, that's where the National Weather Service is, and he volunteered to have me shadow him for a whole day. And I found out that this is a long time ago. This would be the 70s. Nothing was automated. There were no computers really then. So if what they would do is when you became a meteorologist, you would be out in the middle of nowhere like North Dakota or South Dakota, and you sat at a weather station, and every hour you dialed in, you phoned in National Weather Service and told them what the temperature, the wind speed, the humidity, and the rainfall was every hour. For 12 hours a day, you'd have two people there, you'd ship, that's all you did. And you did that for 5 years. And then after 5 years, then you would get, if you still work there, then you would go to the National Weather Service, then you answer the other end of the phone. You accumulated all the weather from all these weather stations that people called in from, and then you would plot it all on a map to get all the contour lines, so the wind speeds and the temperatures, and then you give them to other people that would then predict the weather that would have been there longer than you. So for 10 years, you're doing nothing but record the weather, on a telephone and give it to someone else so they could go sit there and predict it. And after that one day there, I said, I do not want to be a meteorologist. That would be like awful. That'd be, you know, nowadays everything's automated. So at least you're not having a guy sitting there in North Dakota and every hour for 12 hours a day, just recording the weather. But that's what you did. So I said, I am not doing that. So I'm not going to be an astronomer. I'm not going to be a meteorologist. So I tried engineering. And so what I did was I was a senior in high school, and I went to University of Missouri, Kansas City, and they took an aptitude test. And it was a science aptitude test. And sort of like an SAT test, but you answer all these questions, and based on the answers you gave them, and also the answers that were correct and not correct on different types of science, they said I should be an engineer. And that was my aptitude, based on, which is interesting. It's not just what do you like, it's more like getting right or wrong answers on a bunch of different type of topics. They could tell you whether you want to be biology or math or engineering. And it said that mechanical engineering and aerospace engineering seemed to be, my the one that I would like the best. But I always liked airplanes, so I thought about, well, maybe I do an aerospace engineer or mechanical engineering because I like that stuff too. So I talked to one of the professors. He told me that if you're an aerospace engineer, you'll never be able to get a job as a mechanical engineer. Well, mechanical engineers always get jobs as aerospace engineers, and the aerospace industry always has ups and downs. And there'll be times you may not be able to get a job. So he suggested do mechanical engineering because you'll always be able to get a job. And if
Mhm.
airplanes don't work out because they're not hiring, at least you can do other things. So I decided when I went to college to become a mechanical engineer because the jobs would be better. And I like mechanical engineering, all sorts of stuff. But then when I got my master's degree, I did aerospace engineering because I could focus on that. So I sort of did both. It
Nice.
worked out that way. But at least growing up, yeah, it turned out to be, I thought that one test I took, the aptitude, uh, engineering aptitude test, I thought was really, really good. It sort of told me that I, it should do engineering rather than any other disciplines. And, and I'm glad I took the one day in high school where you had to go shadow a meteorologist because that would have been awful. I went to school to do meteorology. I would have
Yeah.
quit college if that's what it turned out to be like. So,
I can't even
uh,
imagine what that would have been like. Like just like charting weather and like calling every hour. That just seems really boring. Not
it's
fun.
boring, right? But I had, even when I graduated college, that first job I got, I'd have these guys who were way older than me, and they would sit there and they just plot graphs all day long for like months. And I said, after a day of just plotting graphs, it's like awful. Just sitting there and getting the data and getting a t-square or getting a French curve and just plotting it in perfect lettering. And this is before they had the computers where the graphing would just happen. And I
Mhm.
said, there's no way I can do this for 6 months. And they said, you young people, you have no focus, everything you want, you can't. They thought that we young engineers were couldn't handle the boringness of engineering. And now, all the younger kids now, they don't want to do the stuff that I do because they think it's boring. They want instant gratification. The people that were older than me, they thought that I wanted instant gratification. So I think kids are all the same. They
Yeah.
just think that the older ones uh, don't mind being a little bit bored and don't mind being off in the middle of nowhere and you just can't. So maybe they're people that were in the 1920s thought the same thing about them. I don't know. But
Um,
there's certain things in life that I think are, computers are great because if, like I knew some accountants that said Excel was great because before Excel, not Microsoft Excel and the ones that came before that, you just sat there, you just added numbers and subtracted numbers on columns and rows. And that's what a CPA would do. And when Excel came along, or it was something before Microsoft Excel, I can't remember what it's called. It was like great because all the tedium of that job went away. And I think for meteorology, the tedium went away. And at least for engineering, the computers made the tedium go away so you could spend your time on stuff that was a little more exciting.
nice. Let's see. Oh, what is one of your favorite memories or like favorite stories from your childhood?
Let's see, favorite. Uh, I'd say favorite was when I was a Boy Scout. I went for a 2 week backpacking trip out in New Mexico. That was just great. Just you and a bunch of kids just backpacking for 2 weeks. It wasn't just like a weekend thing. It was 2 week long, no parents, no adults, just the older kids would tell you what to do. You were out there with, just kids. No one got lost, no one got hurt. You would just do it. So it was fun because it was very much independent, uh, without a bunch of parents thinking that you have to cook. You have to rely on everybody else. If you lost the food, then you're all going to starve. If you burnt the food, no one ate that night.
Oh my
So
God.
boys are different than girls, but you know, boys are sort of random sometimes, especially when you're in high school. But when they have to work together, it will work that way. So, which is a good thing. So I guess military is very, very similar because I think military is a lot like Boy Scouts, just with guns.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
I
teach you to
would
work
say
together as
like,
a team, and they realize that the one kid screws up, everyone dies. So Boy
yeah, I would say
Scouts is
like
like one kid screws up, everyone gets lost.
yeah, I could definitely agree with that with an RTC background for sure. That's exactly what it's like.
Sure, right.
Yeah.
And I thought that's a good. So yeah, my childhood memory, the good memories, I think were all related to just being camping, but not just locally, because then you're just going to go home on Sunday. But if you're way off in the middle of nowhere, out in Colorado, New Mexico, wherever it is, you have to rely on each other because it's cold, it's rainy, it's you get lost, so you have to pay attention.
Yeah. Uh, it does not sound like the life for me.
No,
Um, what college subjects did you like the best, and what college subjects did you like the least? And why, for the college subjects you liked the least, why did you like those the least?
see, so I think my when I was at college, my favorite class was uh, a class in solar energy, and for some reason, it was a PhD, it was a master's and a bachelor's degree class. Take it either one. So it was a senior in high school, it was a senior in college, and took a class in solar energy. So you learned how to design a solar collector, hot water solar collector. And I thought it was really cool because in engineering there's a lot of just boring classes where you have to learn the basics, and it's just the way you have to do it. But then you got to the senior year, and I took this one class of solar energy. Everything came together because you learned to use all your heat transfer and thermodynamics and fluid mechanics, and you designed something real. Then you realized why you had to learn all those things for 3.5 years, because there's no way you could design a solar collector without knowing all the math and science and thermodynamics and fluid mechanics that you had to learn beforehand. So that was a cool class because everything came together. Then college wasn't just a useless 4 years that you had to learn it, but what am I ever going to use to apply this? So, because I don't know, some of your classes may be the same thing. You learn these things that are all just textbooks, but to actually apply it in some other uh, thing, just to do something useful, right? I guess it would be like being a politician, right? You can take all these classes in political science, but then you have to run for an office, right? So to me, the taking a class and learning about solar hot water heaters and how to design one would be like you learning all these political science classes, but then try to help someone run for an election. It all
Yeah.
makes sense then. It's like, oh, I remember this is in poli sci 4003. Oh yeah, that was the one. Okay, I learned about this is what you do, right? How to run an election, how to do whatever you do. So I thought that was a fun class. My least favorite class was mechanics of deformable bodies. They call it DEF BODs in college, but mechanics of deformable bodies, because I hated the class. The professor was hard. I didn't like the subject. No one likes the subject. I didn't want to learn about mechanics. You just had to take it because mechanical engineers had to do it. And it just didn't seem useful for me. And I know that I would never, ever use any of this in anything I did. At the time, I said, I'll never use this. I just need to get out of this class. So, and that's always bad, taking classes that you hate. You're never going to use it, but you have to just pass it anyway. You get a
Yeah.
professor that's just mean and nasty and hard. And it's like, I hate 10 o'clock on, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever the class was. It's like, hated it. And once I took my final, it's like, oh, good. I'll never take this class again. It was probably the hardest class I ever took. Hated it. I'm sure you have those type of classes. It's not useful, but they make you take it.
Yeah.
And that was that. Right.
I like
Uh,
now, like current day, that's mostly gen ed classes. It's a lot of like freshman year and sophomore year. The focus is like building on what you learned from high school. I feel like the worst class I ever had was a math class my freshman year, but I was
mhm.
part of a pathways program for like students who needed extra help in subjects. And that class was like every day. And that was like right around the same time that COVID hit, and that teacher just like stopped teaching, so I had to like create like a whole group chat whenever I came back to Florida of just like people in the class where I basically taught it, but I didn't know what I was doing. So I had to like learn it through other ways that weren't the class to help other people, which kind of helped me. But I don't think I'm ever going to use like algebra like that ever
Hmm.
in like daily life. I could
Right.
be wrong, but I really don't think so. Like I've never sat down and been like, oh yes, y equals mx plus b is slope.
It'd be like me taking a class of poetry or something. It's like, I'll never do poetry. Poetry is, but they make you take some sort of, elective and English elective, and it's like, oh, awful, but just got to get through it.
Yeah.
It's punishment.
Um, do you think that grades are a good indication of your academic achievements, but not only like your academic achievements, but like achievements going forward in your career?
Uh, I would say yes. Of course, at the time, I didn't think it was, I don't think grades were good but then you hear a lot of people that would say, you know, they come out of a class and say the teacher did a test and the test had nothing to do with what we ever, were learned about. And they get a real bad grade in their test. And the professors always say, well, yeah, you just had to apply things, right? This test was about applying what you should have learned. And if you learned it correctly, you could do something a little bit out of the box and understand it. But if all you want to do is memorize the equations and don't understand what you're talking about, you're going to do badly. So, I mean, maybe in non-engineering classes, there's a lot of, there's, I don't know, maybe a little bit different, but I think engineering is very much, they teach you something, you take a test. The ones that get good grades are the ones that understand it. The ones that get bad grades are the ones that don't understand it. It's never about the professor being a good teacher or a bad teacher. It's about you trying to learn the stuff.
Mhm.
So, yes, the teachers do give people bad grades. Like at Georgia Tech, where I was, you could get a 30% on a test and get an A because that would be the highest grade in the class. Sometimes it'd be test, it'd be 14% you get on test and you'd get a B. So teachers just being mean and nasty that way. But as long as they grade it on a curve, I think it would be okay. Now, certain professors, I would say everyone deserved to fail. That's being the teacher is a bad teacher, right? No one's going to all fail, but there should be a curve. And I think grades are probably a good way, but I think it only works in engineering, right? If it was, let's say, writing essays, I don't think it would work that way because then you're getting graded on the teacher's feeling of what your essay was like,
Mhm.
right? They may say, no, I don't really like the way she wrote, get a C. Someone says, oh, they write just the way I would write it. I'm giving them an A. And then you're not really getting a grade. You're getting a how well do you write like the teacher wants to write. So I think that's just wrong, right? But engineering, there's no right or wrong. It's not like it's great. It's like it's either right or wrong. It's all based on math. There's only one right answer.
Right.
So that's a little bit different. So non-engineering, I think grades are probably a bad way to go, but in the math and sciences, it's the way it works. I think it's the correct way.
Yeah. So like obviously you've seen me and Josh throughout the years and like how different we are when it comes to school. And like I feel like Josh is more like blasé about school, where it's just like I don't want to say he doesn't put in a lot of effort, but he doesn't put in a lot of effort. And then whereas I feel that I put in I probably overexert myself in school.
Mm-hmm.
Where would you say that you were in terms of like effort in college?
Okay. I would say I don't need to be the best student in the entire class, right? I'm not going for the A plus all the time. I want to pass my classes. I want to get a B and an A, but C's probably aren't that good. But the reason you want to get great grades is because you want to graduate and get a job, right? So
Mhm.
to me, the whole part of college is to get a job. If you want a hobby, go get a hobby. You do that when you graduate. You can always have any sort of hobby you want, but college is there to get you your first job. And but at the same time, you don't want to be just a bookworm and do nothing but study your 4 years of college, because then you're gonna either blow your head off, or you're gonna go do something stupid, or you're not going to get a job because someone will say this person's boring, right? I think good work-life balance is important. Because when you go for that interview and they say, well, what'd you do in college? They say, well, I studied. I said, what else? Well, I studied. They want to be, and they're going to say, this guy's weird. I don't want to hire him. They want someone that, they want to make sure that he's going to come to work every day. And if they say, man, I partied all the time, and well, they don't want that type. They want someone that, yes, they study when they need to, but yes, they have a little bit of fun when they can. So for me, I had in college, you get all types, right? Some people do well at college, others drop out after a semester or a year because they can't handle the independence of college. The one thing I think about being independent, and when I was a kid, it made me do well in college because I had a good work-life balance and growing up, so good work-life balance in college was important too. Some kids are overprotected in high school, they go to college and they can't handle the freedom, right?
Yeah.
So now you and Josh are two different type of people. But I think Josh would be the type that, sure, he wants to get a job when he graduates, but I think he's not driven to get a certain type of job, right? So it's more like, all right, it's just another part of my life, right? I'm in school, then I'm in college, then I'm going to be in work. If they said, hey, here's the shovel, you're going to dig ditches for the next year, right? Well, I guess I dig ditches for the next year, right? So it's just another part of his life. Whatever they tell him he's going to be doing, that's fine for him. But for you, I think it's more of a college is there. So you see what you can do, what you don't have to do what you like so you don't have to get a job in something you hate, right?
Yeah.
Because you still have to pay the bills, right? So if you're going to pay the bills, is it worth uh, getting 4 years of applied? And yes, you're not going to party all the time, but you have to study and get good grades so you can pick the job you want as opposed to pick any job. I think Josh is a little more, yeah, whatever. If I
Yeah.
graduate, sure, that's right. If I play on computers, great. If I have to dig ditches, great. If I'm going to go sell whatever, great. It doesn't matter. I think
Yeah.
I'm more like you. It's like I know what I want to do, and I had enough jobs in high school that I hated that, so I'm never going to do that.
Yeah.
So you have your goal, but I'm not going to sit there, and I don't have to be the number one student, because if I'm the number one student, that means I wasted some time.
Mhm.
Make me in the top 10%. I'm happy.
Yeah.
That's good enough for me.
Um, how did college, like, and the experiences that you had in college prepare you for the career that you're currently in?
Well, since you're an engineer, engineers all on the job training,
Mhm.
right? So you have to learn your stuff in college, so you know the basics. Uh, because they can't just and engineers just don't happen. You can't just get out of high school and some guy just teaches you how to be an engineer, right? It doesn't work that way. So you have to know the math and science, or else it's not going to work.
Mhm.
But just knowing math and science is going to make you a good engineer. You have to apply it, because you actually have to build stuff or design stuff. So you have to know the basics of engineering, but then you have to learn how to do on-the-job training and learn how to apply that, or else it doesn't work. I've had plenty of people that work for me, got straight A's in college, but basically they just memorized the equations, but didn't apply. So they'd always come to me at work and they have a tough time. And they say, well, what's the exact formula to use? And I'll tell them, actually, there's no exact formula. You have to just think about how things are done, why you pick
Mhm.
different materials, why you have to pick different ways of doing things. And they just couldn't apply themselves that way. It didn't make sense. They wanted to take that one class, memorize the book, memorize the equation, take the test, then go on to the next one the next semester. Engineering
Yeah.
isn't that way because everything is interrelated. So for me, college was boring if all you did was have to learn, the equations. But I really started, and so your freshman, sophomore year, that was the way it was like, right? The first 2 years of school was just doing the fundamentals, which are boring. You
Yeah.
started getting your junior year, you started to apply things. So you
Mhm.
started to realize, like I talked to the class I did on solar energy, I thought it was cool. I did a heating and ventilation air conditioning class that you learned how to build an air conditioner. Those were the cool classes because then you learned why classes were that way. You applied things. One thing I thought was real cool, I did a class and they said, you have it was a certain temperature outside. The wind was blowing like 10 miles an hour and it was like 20 degrees outside. How long would it take you to freeze a pipe, of water? And it's like, so you learned how to It's basically you take like if you had a pipe laying outside, how long would it take for that water to turn to ice?
Mhm.
Right. I thought it was like real cool. It's a complicated thing to do, although it's like very it's simple. It's like, well, I don't know, you freeze a pipe, but the math in it was complicated. But I thought it was real cool because you learned how to take all your math and science, but do something that was applied. And then they knew what the real answer was. So it's like, that's pretty cool. I can predict something pretty accurately just from math and science. So, and that's what engineering's all about. You know, you're not doing the college stuff anymore. You're doing things that are they maybe taught you in school, maybe not. It's all based on that, but it's applying what you know to something that uh, is something that you've never done before. That's why I like engineering.
Did you do any extracurriculars in school? And if you did, like what did you get out of that? There's probably better wording for it, but
Oh, sure. Yeah. Well,
like
how did that? Yeah, you're saying, how did that make you a better person or make you
yeah.
from?
Or
Yeah.
like how did that make you more prepared for just like the I guess personable aspects of like
Hmm.
adulthood?
Sure. Uh, I would make my main thing I did was I ran all the time. So I ran marathons. So I didn't really. I used to run a little bit when I was in high school because you always did it for baseball. Running wasn't something that you did for fun. It was just something you did to keep in shape.
Yeah.
For baseball, and I did cross country, but I was running just because it was running. But when in college, uh, college was hard. So if you did nothing but studied, you go crazy. And running was a good thing to do because you didn't have to drive a half an hour to go get to a gym and then drive a half an hour back and blah blah blah. It was just get right outside your dorm room and start running. So I had a
Mhm.
few friends that I'd run with, so you could run and talk at the same time. And it was good because you exercised, which cleared your mind a lot. Because to me, exercising cleared your mind because you can't think about college when you're running. It just doesn't work that way. You sort of just ran, and then by the
Yeah.
time you got back, had something to eat, you're ready to study. Your brain was and your body was calmed down enough where you could study. So to me, running was a real good thing. I played sports, a bunch of sports in college. It'd be I played basketball and football. This is intramural basketball, intramural football, intramural baseball, intramural volleyball. All the different sports that they would have these. Uh, yeah, a lot of softball I'd play. So sports all the time. That kept you from getting in trouble.
Yeah, I
Uh,
did the same thing.
yeah, you're probably like me. Sports doesn't. You don't have to do it. Like if I was on like the football team at the school, that's like all the time is nothing but playing football, right? But if you did intramurals, it's an hour a day, an hour, a couple days a week. You play, so that's not bad. To me, you didn't have much time more than an hour a day to do something.
Mhm.
So you ran for an hour, you played basketball for an hour, you played your softball for an hour. That's perfect. Now on the weekends, then you could do whatever you wanted. I would work all the time. So I worked at the post office at college for money. So I worked wake up at like 6 in the morning on every Saturday to go deliver the mail. I'd work during school. I'd deliver the mail like 6 in the morning before I went to class. So I was never one to sleep a lot. So you always had you worked, you studied, go to a little exercise, and that was it. And then when I got older, I would work for a company that Georgia Tech had. So I would be an engineer there. So I would get a little more money, but it'd be better than delivering the mail at 6 in the morning.
Yeah. Um, so you before I did this, like wrote up all these questions and things, I did a lot of research on you. I found out a lot of really cool things. And something that I found out about you that I want to touch on before I talk to you about Georgia Tech was that you went to the University of Texas at Austin, right? For
It
your
was
master's?
Arlington. It was Arlington. It was University of Texas at Arlington.
Arlington.
Different. Yeah. Right.
So why did you choose UT to get your master's degree?
Masters. Yeah. So I had my bachelor's degree and started to work. Right. But then I wanted to get a master's degree. But then, I said, well, there's no reason to quit work to get a master's. It's engineering. You don't do that sort of thing. So I decided to go to night school. So I took one class a semester, took 5 years to do it. So you take one class a semester, so 3 classes a year, over 5 years, and you got your master's. So I would, work during the daytime, and at nighttime I would, take a class. And then when I worked at Lockheed Martin, you could take classes at Lockheed Martin with closed circuit TV, so you didn't have to actually go to campus all the time. So it'd
Mhm.
be like a noon class. You did it over lunch. So the class would be noon at University of Texas, and they had a TV monitor and they had a telephone, and there'd be people in the class, but then you'd have a camera that would show the teacher, and you could have a telephone. If you had to ask a question, you pick up the telephone and you would ask a question over the loudspeaker. And so that's how I did it, one class a semester, and eventually I got my master's, and they didn't care. Lockheed Martin said, "All right, well, whatever." They didn't. Engineers don't get any more money getting a master's degree, but is it's one of those things. They didn't care at all whatsoever if I had a master's or not. So that's why you don't like drop out of school for 2 years to get your master's degree for engineering, because you have no pay for 2 years, and they're not going to care once you get your master's degree. They're not going to give you any of that money back. So, but they paid for my school. The University of Texas, college was cheap back then. Uh, it was $4 a semester, $4 an hour is what it cost to go to college, getting it back then. So I'd get, sure, Lockheed Martin paid for my class, but it was $12 a class. It'd take a 3-hour class. It was $12. It was like cheap. The book would be
That's
$100, but
so
the class was,
unfair.
it was
I
like
think I
super
pay
cheap.
like
In-state tuition.
$10,000 a semester. And
Sure.
that's like, I think the only reason I pay like that little is because my school does this thing called the Gulf Coast Promise, where like any state that touches the Gulf gets like in-state tuition. I don't know why they have it. I'll have to look into it a little bit more.
Hmm.
But that's wild. Like $12 a class. I wish.
Was,
Oh my
yeah, that
God.
would be, yeah, that's the way to University of Texas, the college system owns so many oil wells that it basically paid for colleges. So
That
tuition
makes
was super
sense.
cheap.
Yeah.
And then I remember one year the economy wasn't doing great, and they tripled tuition. That was $12 an hour rather than $4 an hour. So you paid $36 a class. And people were saying that's wrong. It's tripled, but it's still cheap compared to other states. Now who knows what it's like. But back then, the state system owned so much oil that it paid for the education system for colleges. So all right, so you take one class a semester. That was it. It wasn't something that you needed. I figured, why not? Maybe one day I'll need to get the master's degree. The classes were interesting, so that's why I did it. Because I was doing a lot of things with the space shuttle, and there were classes in reentry aerodynamics and reentry aerothermodynamics that I would take. That would be interesting,
Mhm.
that I was using at work. So it actually was something that was useful for what I was doing at work, even though they weren't going to pay me an extra for it, just for knowledge.
So I know like growing up, you've always been a big Georgia Tech fan. Um, so and I know Michael went to Georgia Tech.
Mhm.
So why did you choose Georgia Tech for your undergrad? Like out
Okay,
of any other school?
sure. Well, for engineering, Georgia Tech was one of the, best schools in the country. It also was in the warm, so I was living in Kansas, and Kansas gets real cold in the wintertime. I mean, way colder than like Boston, because it's Midwest gets cold. It's like, Canada. So it gets super cold. I said, I do not want to live where it's just this cold all the time. I had enough of the 20 below zero type stuff. And so then people told me about Georgia Tech. It's warm. It's in Atlanta. It's also a big city. And to me, it was like I wanted to live in a big city, but I also wanted to live where it's warmer.
Mhm.
And Georgia Tech is a state school, so it wasn't like super expensive like some of the private schools. And my parents wanted to have me go to MIT. And I said, well, first of all, we can't afford it. My dad always said, well, you always get loans and grants and things like that. But MIT was the most expensive school in the country. And it's like, you know what? I don't want to go up to Boston where it's like cold all the time. And then plus I had an attitude back then. So MIT required you to have an interview. I said, I am not going to have an interview, and they had no interview, and Kansas didn't have any people to interview. You had to go to St. Louis. And I said, I am not driving all the way to St. Louis, Missouri to go have some guy interview me just, just so I can go pay money to go to college. Not going to happen. So I said, but the good thing about Kansas, Kansas has a rule. I don't know if they still do, but back then, if you graduate any Kansas high school, you can go to any Kansas college, automatically get accepted. You don't
Yeah,
have
they have that
you don't
in
have to take the
Florida.
SAT test, don't have to take the ACT. It's just graduate at Kansas high school, you can go to any Kansas college you want.
That's like
So
with some of the schools in Florida, they do the same thing, except for like the only places it's not eligible, I believe, are the University of Florida and uh Florida State, which I think is weird because Florida State is a state school,
mhm.
but I know that they do it kind of in Florida.
Yeah, just
So
not the two big schools.
yeah, not
Yeah,
the schools that anybody wants to go to.
sure, right. Yeah, Kansas, you can go to University of Kansas or Kansas State just by graduating high school. So the pressure's off. So you definitely are going to go to college, right? So
Yeah.
it'd be like if you were graduating high school in Florida and say, well, I'm already know I'm going to get either to Florida, Florida State, or South Florida, Central Florida, any of those. I just go there. So there's no big pressure for you to try real hard to get into all the kind of apply to the ones that, yeah, if you get in, great. But if you don't, all right, I'll go to University of Kansas, whatever. So,
Yeah.
so I applied to Purdue and Georgia Tech. Those were the two schools I wanted to go to. I didn't want to go to MIT. Uh, and those were the two at the time, it's still that way. They're two real good engineering schools. And one was in Indiana. I said, well, this is going to be cold and just like Kansas City. And one's in Atlanta, which is going to be warm and a big city. I got accepted to both. So I was like, all right, I'm going to Georgia Tech. So
Nice.
if I didn't go to Georgia Tech, I'd go to Purdue. If I didn't go to
Nice.
Purdue, all right, I'll go to University of Kansas. But didn't want to, but
Backups on backups.
it's the backup school. And it's nice to have a backup school that you don't have to worry about. It's still going to college.
Yeah.
So
So,
yeah, Purdue or Georgia Tech, and it was an easy decision. Well, one is freezing and one in the middle of nowhere, and one
hot.
is
Yeah.
warm and in a big city. But I never
Yeah.
saw either school before I went there. Back then you didn't travel to the colleges. You didn't have uh, anything other than you apply, you get in, and then you go there. So the first time I went to Atlanta my entire life is when I started college. Never been to Atlanta, never saw Georgia Tech. Just what you did. You gotta accept your parents weren't going to drive you down there to check it out. They didn't take these trips over spring break like they do nowadays. So
Oh, so you're telling me that your uncle doesn't take you to Navy and then have your iPhone ring in the crib of John Paul Jones? That doesn't happen? That didn't happen
that
back
didn't
then?
happen back then. Nope, it did not happen back then. You just applied and you got in, and it's like, all right, well, I guess I'm going there. And I never saw the school until I actually stepped foot on campus.
It's cool though.
Yeah.
Um, so did college solidify your choice to go into thermal engineering?
Oh, yeah. Right. Because the good thing about Georgia Tech, if you're in mechanical engineering, there's a lot of different subdisciplines to mechanical engineering, but Georgia Tech made you declare whether you wanted to do mechanisms or thermal. And your senior year was spent on with one of those two. So the class I did take, I did not want to do mechanisms, didn't want to do cams and gears and linkages and all that sort of stuff, but I really liked the thermal part. So I did that. So all my classes, my senior year would be all the thermal and heat transfer and fluid mechanics and that thermodynamics, and I like that sort of stuff. So, uh, and even when I was a co-op, uh, I was co-oping for a company, and I asked to do the heat transfer sort of things. They gave me some assignments that would be all based on how much heater power it would take to heat up this big thing of water,
Mhm.
and how much insulation needed to keep things insulated. So at least when I interviewed, but it sounded like I knew what I was talking about because I had a background in the thermodynamics, not just the regular kid with 4 years of school and no real interest. I could tell them I really like to do this stuff, but I also did it as a co-op and I really liked it. And so they understood that I wasn't going to just work there for a half a year and then realize I hated it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think yeah, classes would teach you to what you liked and didn't like, but also I think it was in engineering at least is important to either be a co-op or go to summer internships or summer jobs, just so you can understand if you liked it or not. Because I've had plenty of people that work at NASA with me as an intern, And after a semester of working, they come back and they say, I hate it. This engineering's not for them.
Mhm.
Right. So you might as well learn it in college rather than learn it when you graduate and don't like it.
Yeah. So earlier you mentioned that you worked at Lockheed Martin, and I don't think like a lot of people, at least my age, probably like older for sure, definitely know it. But like, what is like in layman's terms, what is Lockheed Martin?
Okay. Well, there used to be two companies. There was a Lockheed Corporation, there was a Martin Marietta, and they all combined. So they combined Lockheed, Martin Marietta, and LTV, and they formed one mega company called Lockheed Martin. So Lockheed is Lockheed and Martin Marietta put together. There's and LTV, but they named them in just one name. Northrop was a company, and Grumman was a company, and they combined to be called Northrop Grumman. And you may not know that company, but no.
Not a clue.
So no clue. Okay, but nowadays a lot of these big companies combined. So there's now Lockheed Martin, there's Martin Marietta, and those are the, I mean, should be Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman, and those are the two big companies that would do stuff. And then, on camera would say, well, there's also Raytheon. That's like a big company that they combined in with the United Technologies, and now they're Raytheon Technologies. So you have like three big defense companies. But Lockheed, the thing is, space and military are similar. It's a big government contract to get to a company, and they build something for the government, right? So Lockheed and Northrop Grumman, they'd build missiles and tanks and guns and everything else for the military, but they also build satellites and rockets for NASA because
Mhm.
it takes those. They're very similar, the way it's built, even though they're two different. One's peace, one's war, but it's the same basic process. So it's real hard to build something that's billions of dollars if you're just a small company, right? You just don't have the know-how, you don't have the facilities, you don't have. So it takes very, very large military, uh, defense, government contractors to build very, very large things that it may take 1,000 engineers to build something,
Mhm.
right? So a small company is not going to be able to do that, right? So companies like a Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman have the engineers. You may have 80,000 employees, so then they can go bid on something like, I'm going to build a rocket going to the moon, or I'm going to build a satellite going to some other planet. It takes a company that large to have the know-how and also the personnel to be able to pull that one off. If Tesla is a different story, right? They are actually, Elon Musk was able to just build something from scratch, but it took him a long time, right? It wasn't something that he could build overnight.
Mhm.
General Motors or Ford, they'd be much more, have the inclination to build like an electric car. They just didn't want to, right?
Yeah.
Elon Musk really wanted to, and he focused. If GM or Ford want to do it, they could really focus, do a better job at it. They just didn't want to, right? So think of yes, sure, there's some small startups, and that's fine if you're a computer company because you don't take much other than computers. But when you need to build a car, you'll find out that it's hard to do without a lot of machinery and things like that. So Ford and GM, think of them as being like the equivalent to Lockheed Martin or Northrop Grumman, like these big mega car companies.
Yeah.
Sure, can a bicycle company that builds bicycles get together and build an airplane or build a car? They could. It's just a little harder for them.
How did you get your job at Lockheed Martin? And while you were working there, like what was your role?
Okay, well, I interviewed, in college, and I had a couple different job offers, and I liked, you know, Lockheed Martin the best. Uh, I got offered a job at, uh, it was General Dynamics in San Diego. I thought it was a really cool place to live. So I was thinking about moving to San Diego because I thought the city was great, but the job wasn't that good. And Lockheed Martin was in Dallas, so I'd rather live in San Diego than Dallas. But the job was better, but the city wasn't as good. And I
Yeah.
talked to one of my professors, and they said, for your first job, go with the best job, right? Because once you get the job, college doesn't matter anymore. They're going to just base your next job off of how well you did your first job. So if you're going for the city, you just wasted your education. So I said, oh, I'll take the best job, and that was at Dallas. So I interviewed and decided to pick that job. And then I worked on the space shuttle, the space station were my first two jobs. Neither of those were built yet. So the space station was just starting. Now
Mhm.
it's 20 something years old, but 25 years old, I guess. But back then it was just starting to be designed in 1984. So it was just starting. So, I thought it was a cool thing to do. So I worked on the space station and the space shuttle as a thermal engineer and stayed there for 14 years.
So the ISS, when you were working on that, that was like a brand new idea.
Right.
Um, and what would you say the lasting importance of your work specifically on that project was?
Well, if you ever look at the space station, you'll see the big radiators, these big white things that all hang out, and that's what I worked on. So that cooled the electronics and cooled the living quarters and cooled all the solar panels on the space station. So I worked on the cooling system. So everything doesn't just burn up when it's orbiting around the Earth. So when the
Mhm.
astronauts turn on all the electronics and turn on the computers and do everything else, it doesn't just make the space station super hot and just sort of burn up. So it's lasting because it's worked for 20 something years and it hasn't had a problem. So
Yeah, it hasn't blown
we
up.
did a good
So
job. It worked, right? And then I did all this on the space shuttle. We did all the carbon leading edges, worked on that for a long time too. So it kept the space shuttle from burning up as it re-entered the atmosphere. Now there's no more space shuttle because they ended that program, but the space station's still going.
yeah, the space station's still there. I
Right.
remember I took a class on astronomy actually in high school, and I thought
Hmm.
it was really cool. But we learned about like the ISS and all of that cool stuff. And I had no idea until I did this research on you that you worked on that, and I thought that was like really, really cool. I've been bragging
Hmm.
to my friends about it. I'm like, yeah, well, my uncle worked on the International Space Station, so
Hmm. Did they all say, what's the International Space Station?
yeah,
Some do.
pretty much.
Some don't even know what that is. Some
Yeah,
will
most
say,
of
I
them
didn't
don't
know.
know like what it is or like its importance, which I think is crazy, but also I probably wouldn't know had I not taken that class. So,
Okay, sure. Oh, yeah.
do you have any projects that you worked on with Lockheed Martin that you would say that you maybe regret working on now, or any projects that um you would classify as like some of your favorite work that you've ever done?
Uh, let's see. I would say no, because everything was interesting enough. I had some bad bosses. So I'd say I always had good work, but I had some bosses that I hated. And sometimes you could have a great program and an awful, awful boss that's just a mean human being that doesn't, that's not, they should just get rid of them because
Mhm.
one boss can make 100 people want to quit work. Right. So, and then sometimes you can do awful work, but you have a great boss and you want to work for them. So to me, I didn't have any jobs I hated, but I had bosses that I actually could not stand that, I'm surprised they stuck around. But after a while, I was there 14 years and I just hated my job after that. I hated the bosses. Uh, the big boss was just mean and nasty, and I could just tell it wasn't for me.
Mm.
And so that's when I moved to Maryland. Now on Karen, she wanted to stay in Dallas, so but she didn't mind moving, but she said she would only move to the East Coast between Washington, D.C. and Boston that has a Raytheon facility.
So naturally.
So naturally, because I was looking at working like in Detroit, I wanted to thought about working for a car company and working in Michigan or something like that. And then she said, no way.
So, Lockheed Martin, I know like with Raytheon, like with On Karen, there's a lot of different facilities that they have just like domestically. At the Dallas facility for Lockheed, like what is the main purpose of that facility?
Yeah, when I was there, the main purpose was missiles in space. So you either made missiles or you built the space station and the space shuttle.
Mhm.
And those were the two things that you did there. So I did both. Whenever the space station was working, I'd work on the space station, and a lot of times they would stop. The space station would just stop. Congress would cancel it, And they say too much money, we're canceling it. So I'd go work on missiles. And then what NASA did is they decided to, because back when I first started, all the space stations getting built in California and Texas, and that was it. And it's too easy for senators to say, well, that's that's, what, 4 senators out of the 100. So they kept canceling it, because it's like, that's too much money. So what NASA did is they decided to put companies in all 50 states. So even if you were living in South Dakota, there would be one company in South Dakota that would build something for the space station. And their senator and their congressman would say, well, we can't cancel the space station because now some company out of my state's gonna lose out. And so NASA got smart and they kept space station going because they learned political, NASA shouldn't be political. NASA should just be, let's just build something.
Mm-hmm.
But everything's political when it's getting funded by Congress. And if you are on a smart, then whatever you want to build, you put it in 50 states. So like Amtrak, right? Amtrak, what's it used for? It's really just for DC, New York, and Boston, right? It's that one.
Pretty much.
It's very, very busy, but those are what, 3 or 4 senators care about it.
Rich too. Rich worked on that. He works on that project. He just put a new Amtrak station in Western Mass. Come on, we're connected.
Of course, because it's Massachusetts, right? It's Massachusetts, New York, and Maryland, and Philadelphia too, maybe. So maybe a little part of Pennsylvania. But the other states, I don't need Amtrak. What they do though is they put Amtrak has a station in almost every state, just so that congressmen will vote for it. Because if it was only the one that makes the most sense, it'd just be the one line from DC to Boston, and it would cover Boston, New York, and Philadelphia, and DC, Baltimore. That's it. But Amtrak would never be around, so it's again political. You have to have something that every state would vote for. So that's the way space station was, and space shuttle was the same way. It can't be just a California and Texas build, or else you have to, especially for very expensive programs.
Yeah. So going into more about your NASA career, how did you get your current job at NASA? Were you recruited for that? Did you just apply?
Yeah, I applied. So didn't want to work for Lockheed Martin anymore. And I applied for the job and got a job. So it's like, all right, I'll move to Maryland. And Aunt Karen did not want to move to Maryland, but she agreed to do it. So and then she found out that she got a good job. Raytheon has a real good facility here. So she got a good job here too. So I worked for I was in the thermal engineering branch in Lockheed Martin. So I transferred to the thermal engineering branch at NASA. So it was similar work, but instead of doing space station and space shuttle, I'd work on satellites. That's what NASA Goddard does. So I was.
I know where that is.
And Goddard, right? So I started working on a bunch of.
Every time I go home and every time I come back to New Orleans.
Yeah.
There's
so I started working there, and
Yeah.
then I started working. Got promotions and things like that there too, and now I'm the chief engineer for the thermal branch. So I'm I'm the head engineer for the thermal branch.
Awesome.
So they like me enough where I'm old enough and smart enough, I guess, where everyone comes to me for advice. So I'm the head engineer, you could say.
What are some of the current projects that you're working on?
Well, my main one right now is a project called Dragonfly. It's a helicopter that's going to go to Titan, which is the moon of Saturn. So it's going to take 7 years to get there. And then it's going to just fly like a helicopter and land on the ground, and it's going to suck up soil samples that are going to check to see if there's any sort of life or biology or organic compounds. And then it senses all that with mass spectrometers and gas chromatographs that we build. And then it takes off and flies to another part of Titan, so it can fly for 40 minutes. So then it lands again and then picks up more soil samples, and it's going to do that for 3 years, just flying all around Titan to go check for soil samples and see if they can find life. So I'm the thermal engineer on that. So I make sure all the instruments get to the right temperature. They don't get because Titan is very, very cold. It's 94 Kelvin in temperature. So it's like negative 180 degrees Celsius. So probably like negative 300 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's very, very, very cold, but it's also has high pressure. So that's why helicopters can fly. So out of all the disciplines, thermal is the most important discipline because you can't have helicopters flying at negative 300 degrees very easily. So you have
Hmm.
to make sure it doesn't get just too cold. You also have to make sure things don't get too hot and burn up. So it's an interesting project.
Yeah,
So
it
that's
sounds really cool.
my one I work on the most. And then I have another program called Da Vinci. And Da Vinci is going to be a probe going to Venus. It's going to land on Venus. So check the atmosphere uh, of Venus to see what it's made out of. So between going to Venus and going to Titan, then I have another one that's going around the Earth, checking the atmosphere of the Earth, uh, called GDC. So it's uh, you know not as interesting, but NASA has all these satellites you have to work on. Some orbit the Earth to check for stuff. Sometimes scientists want to find things and thermally. It's like I don't care, just I'll make the satellite work. But then other places you go that are pretty interesting. So going to Titan is interesting. Going to Venus is interesting. Orbiting the Earth is cool because sometimes you find, like the how much plankton there is in the oceans, how much rainfall there is. One satellite I'm working on is going to find the if the global ice caps are all melting, how much snow is, and all the icebergs and the glaciers, and how much are they melting every year. So those are important. The
Yeah,
satellites, may not be super important science, high tech science, but it's important enough that we need to know for Earth's weather, things like that. I had a satellite that we went to the sun, called Solar. Well, back then it was called Solar Probe Plus. Now it's Parker Solar Probe, but it would go as close to the sun as any satellite's ever been, and check to see what the sun is made out of.
oh, that's really cool.
It was a cool one, right? It's 500 times the heat of the sun we get on Earth, so it's 500 times hotter, is what the satellite had to do because it was so close to the sun.
Oh,
So there are certain satellites that are interesting thermally because to design one takes a lot of uh, know-how and applied engineering. Nothing you're going to see a textbook that tells you how to do it. You just have to think of stuff and say, "Oh, this may work." Right? Well, let's test it and see. And if it does, hey, great, it works. I think that's the interesting things. It's not just looking at a textbook and they're not going to tell you how to do it.
right. What are some of your favorite projects that you've worked on while you've been at NASA, and like what was your role in those
Mhm.
projects?
Sure. Well, I worked on the Hubble telescope. And that was a cool one because the Hubble telescope was like the first big space telescope that we had, and everyone knows about it, right? So you can work on a satellite no one's ever heard of before, but when you say I work on a Hubble telescope, so oh yeah, I know that one. I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty cool. But sometimes the problem is when you work on very, very large programs, you're just a little cog in the wheel. There's gonna 1,000 people working on the same one.
Hmm.
Sometimes you get on a real cool instrument, and there may only be 20 of you working on one instrument. So sometimes it's good to work on a small team. Other times it's good to work on this mega team. Uh, for me, I found that if you work on anything that has a lot of astronauts on it, like the space station, the space shuttle, things go very slowly because they want to make sure you're not going to kill anybody. But if you
Hmm.
work on the Hubble telescope, what's the worst that can happen? It blows up on the launch pad, or it doesn't work when it gets into orbit, but you're not going to kill anybody. So it's a little
Yeah.
bit easier to work. There's not all the paperwork and the testing that you have to do, the safety involved, because sometimes all the safety things just take forever for it to get launched.
Yeah. I can only
Right. So,
imagine.
but it's also good to see. You don't want to be known as the one, oh yeah, you're the one that screwed up and it killed 5 astronauts, right? It's better to say, oh, you screwed up and the satellite blew up on the launch pad, but that's better than killing people.
Yeah, I would agree. Um, can you tell me about your involvement with the Mission to Mars project?
Sure. Yeah, I worked a program called MoMA. So MoMA is the satellite is called, well, the rover is called ExoMars, and ExoMars is uh, a rover that the Europeans are building with the Americans. We're building the main instrument. The Europeans are building the rover, and it's going to go down. It's going to fly to Mars, and it's going to drill down to the soil and see if they find life. Because they think that on the surface of Mars there's no life because cosmic rays killed everything. Because of get any sort of microorganism, it'll probably get cancer, leukemia, whatever it is. They're all dead due to cosmic rays.
Mhm.
But if you're buried under the soil a few meters, things may survive because the cosmic rays can't get down through all the soil of Mars. So ExoMars is going to be a rover that just drives around Mars, drills soil samples up from beneath the surface, and see if they can find life. Uh, that's important for, if humans want to go back to Mars, which I think eventually they will someday. You have to learn how to live there. You have to learn how to prevent the cosmic rays from killing everybody from cancer and things like that. So I think eventually we'll, sure we can go to the moon. That's closer, but it's in reality, it's to teach us how to get to Mars and live on Mars. That's uh, more Earth-like.
Do you think, like, realistically, there's ever going to be a point in human history where humans would have to migrate to Mars? Or do you think that there is a way that because I know that obviously humans, we suck. And so, like, we're kind of ruining the earth right now with like
Hmm.
everything that we do. Do you think that within my lifetime or like somewhere down the line, we would have to leave Earth and go to Mars?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to pollute the planet or make it so much nuclear weapons that it's inhabitable.
Mhm.
But at some point, Earth's going to have 10 billion people, and with 10 billion people, it's going to be hard to live. It's going to be unless you. I think you have to lower the population. We're what at 6 billion people or something like that now. But if
Mhm.
it gets to 10 billion, that's a lot of people. I think you may be
Yes.
forced to go to Mars just to uh, try to grow the food and plant just to avoid the population growth you're going to get here. But it's expensive to go there. So I think in your lifetime we'll have astronauts going to Mars, and maybe they'll live there on some Mars, like a small Mars colony. I don't think we're going to
Mhm.
get thousands of people going to Mars yet, but at some point I bet we will. At some point, people are going to think, it's sort of like the Wild West, right? People would say, "Hey, we live in East Coast. Why would we ever want to go move to California?" It doesn't make any sense. So, but you did it because they make money at the gold rush and things like that. It made everyone go out to California. And then once they stayed there, then it sort of grew. I
Mhm.
think people are going to go to Mars not just for the hell of it. They're going to go to Mars for a reason that they can make money at it.
Right.
And they're going to find something on Mars that's going to be like, maybe, I don't know, maybe they'll find some mineral on Mars that's you can't get on Earth, and it's cheaper to mine it on Mars. And then you get people going there to make money. And then as people make money, more people go there. And then Mars will become habitable. So I
Yeah.
don't think we're going to go there just because we need to expand our horizons or too many people on Earth, so we have to go colonize something else because it's very expensive to do that. But they'll do it if someone can make money at it. I think making
Yeah.
money at it is because they're going to find something on Mars that's maybe they'll find a lot of platinum or a lot of gold or a lot of something that happens to be on Mars. People say, I can go to Mars and mine platinum. I can make $1 billion at it. Well, then it's worth going to Mars. And then
Yeah.
once people are there, then people start making restaurants and hotels and everything else. It'd be like a mini California in 1840s. That's how I think it happens.
What do you think the next big thing for NASA in terms of science is?
Uh, I think I think they're going to go to Mars and find something that would be real interesting. Like I think they're going to find bacteria there one day. Maybe they'll drill in the soil and they'll find something. Because I think a lot of people on Earth think that God put us here on Earth and we're the only people in the entire universe that the Bible is written only for humans and only Earth and we're it. And I think it's gonna people may not be ready to find out that there's bacteria other places and there could be life other places. I think
Mhm.
it's better for us because we'll find out that if humans aren't the only people in the universe, we're not special. We just happen to be the biology was right. It's then you go to Mars and say, hey, the biology was right there too. Life forms wherever there's the right biology.
Mhm.
I think that's going to make humans think that we're not special anymore. Because I think we sort of screw up the environment thinking that, well, God's going to take care of us, or the
Yeah.
environment's always going to be here because it'll take care of itself. When you find out other places had life like Mars and there's no life there anymore, say what happened to Mars that made it so it got real cold. Venus, they may have life there too, but now it's super hot. So I think people realize that uh, you find life on Mars or find ancient life on Mars, I think it'll make people treat Earth a little bit better.
Yeah.
I think it'll be a good discovery. Now, you may find out there's life on Titan and there's Europa. So there's Titan, Europa. They think there may be life on. So NASA's going to those places too. It'll take a long time to get there, but if they find life at those places, then you're going to find out there's life everywhere. That's
It's like,
important.
yeah, that's really cool.
Hmm.
What's your favorite and least favorite part about working at NASA? Because I know
Uh,
that while I was there this summer, that you had told me some pretty interesting stories about the interns.
hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, my interest, I think my favorite part about NASA is building something that you may take a couple years to build, but it's actually going to like get launched and find some science. So there'll be all these like Hubble telescope. They'll send these pictures back, or in James Webb Space Telescope. I worked on that for a long time. They'll
Mhm.
send pictures back from James Webb, and you'll say, "Hey, I worked on that one." Yeah, so it's cool when you actually build something and it actually does real science, and they show you pictures or they get some science from it, and it makes you happy that you were part of the reason why that thing got good science.
Mhm.
So I like that part. The boring part about NASA sometimes is uh, at the very beginning, just coming up with requirements, just doing paperwork and requirement documents and things that are just boring.
Mhm.
And you have to do it, especially younger people don't know how to do that. So it's the older ones that have been there a long time. We do that. So it's going to a lot of meetings. We're just writing the requirements so you can, and you need it, or else you don't know what to build, but it's
Right.
boring.
Yeah.
And it's okay to do for part of the time, but if that's all I did, it'd be awful.
Yeah.
Uh, and and certain bosses I don't like. Certain bosses are just not good bosses. Uh, they they work on the backs of other people to make themselves look good. And
Mhm.
the good bosses I've had, and the ones that I always try to do is like you make life good for your employees, and you make sure the employees are happy and they're doing a good job and they're recognized. But there's
Yeah.
other bosses out there that are just make everyone work like slaves, just make themselves look good. And that's to me the key is if once a job is done, will all those people work for you again? And there's certain people that I'll never ever work for them again. And maybe yes, they launched a good satellite, but they made everyone work nights and weekends and holidays, and they treated people like crap just to get the product out on schedule and under budget and make themselves look good. They don't
Mhm.
thank anybody else that's under them. That's why I think Elon Musk is crap. Yes, he's smart, and yes, he got a Tesla, and yes, he got SpaceX, but he's an awful manager and an awful uh, you person to work for. So who wants to work for that, right? I'd rather yeah do something where the people want to work for you again,
Yeah.
because you're not here to work just to build something. You're here to actually understand that there's another 200 people that are doing the same thing as you, and you can't take advantage of them.
Yeah, most definitely.
Hmm.
Why is NASA, in your opinion, such a vital asset to the federal government?
Sure. Okay. Because what happens is NASA doesn't have to earn a profit, right? Because the things that we do at NASA, we're not there to get a return on investment, although we do, right? Because like the Apollo program, wasn't for Apollo, we wouldn't have had cordless drills, we wouldn't have had solar panels, we wouldn't have computers. That increased the technology that
Mhm.
are now used every day. Uh, the Hubble telescope and things like that. They made all sorts of different cordless stuff that we have every day now. That better computers, everything else, same as Apollo. Uh, so the problem is if you have to earn a profit, the Lockheed Martins and things like that would build something because they can like build a rocket that goes to like an asteroid, mines things, then come back with $1 billion worth of platinum. Right, that's something that they would do because it's a return on investment. But going to Titan and finding life, there's no money in that, right? Finding life or finding uh, organic materials on another body is not, it doesn't increase the profit margin. That just is science. So
Yeah.
NASA is important because we do the things that are hard and the things that are not profitable, and especially the things that are hard, because sometimes you say, I'm going to go to Titan with a helicopter and fly around. you'll say, well, what happens if it crashes? I'm going to spend $1 billion and it may crash. It's not uh, it's not worth doing. But NASA will do the things that if it crashes, okay, no one's going to get fired. We tried the real hard things, and we may learn something from it. And then the things we learn, we give to industry, and they can do the profitable stuff, like computers and solar panels and cordless drills and all the things that we learned from NASA. They get used every other place. But if we had to earn a profit, we'd never do it in the first place.
Yeah. So you work with mostly unmanned vehicles. Why did you choose to work with unmanned missions versus manned missions?
Manned, right? Because I worked on the space shuttle, I worked on the space station, and I just found that it was just like I told you before, there's way too much bureaucracy and overhead and extra people involved that makes things go real slow because everything has to make sure that it's safe, and all the paperwork involved and how to verify that it was safe and how something's not going to break and then kill somebody, right? So working on something like that's a rocket that launches people, or the space station, the space shuttle, maybe half the people there actually do something useful, and the other half are there just to make sure you don't kill anybody, which is useful too, but it doesn't increase the engineering. It just makes sure that it's safe.
Yeah.
And that got to, I'd rather do something that you don't have to be safe all the time. We call it running with scissors a bit. So sometimes you have to just run with scissors. If you're safe all the time, sometimes nothing ever gets done. So I like that is better than doing things with astronauts. Some people love doing it with astronauts. They love astronauts, but it takes forever.
Mhm.
I'd rather build something that's quicker rather than spending the time to make sure everything is perfectly safe.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you like a whole bunch of questions on thermal engineering, but I think that throughout like the conversation, I've gotten a pretty good like idea. So we only have
Yeah,
like a couple more questions, so only a
sure.
little bit of time. But I have some questions that I've just been curious about. Do you miss Dallas?
Nope, not at all.
Really?
Yeah, Dallas was shopping malls, and that's what everyone did. You dressed up to go to a shopping mall.
Yeah, but
Uh,
like what about JFK?
it was well, Dallas. There was you're a long way away from any place that you go camping, right? It's there's not many trees. It's flat. You had to go to Arkansas to go backpacking, or Colorado is like a real long way away.
Mhm.
Uh, it's basically Dallas is a city, right? And you would go to the shopping malls on the weekend, and during the week you just sort of worked. And I like where I am in Maryland because there's all sorts of stuff. There's a big city downtown that you can go to. There's all sorts of camping around the area. There's museums and things like that. Dallas had, yeah, if you went down to see the JFK Memorial, where he got shot, and then you sort of not so much. it's it's not much there, although it's a nice city.
Mhm.
But I like places where I can do a lot more things outside. And now Washington D.C. has everything there, but it's crowded. It's much more expensive. But no matter what you want to do, there's something there. You can go skiing that's close. You can go backpacking that's close. You can go to a big city and go to restaurants and museums. So, but it's not as crowded as New York City. It's not as expensive as New York City, so that's good too.
Right.
But it's only 4 hours away from New York City. So you want to do New York, you can four
You
hours
could
on the
just
bus,
go.
you just go. Right.
What do you do in your free time these days? I know that for you don't work with the Eagle Scouts anymore?
Yeah, I
Question
still
mark?
do. What happened is, I did that for 20 something years. I was a scoutmaster. Uh, and then I finally got to retire. But in our Boy Scout troop, what happens is for the 6 months after you retire, you're not allowed to do anything with the troop. So then, because if I still stayed with the troop, the boys would still be asking me all the questions rather than asking the new scoutmaster all the questions. So they say
Mhm.
for 6 months, you don't do anything. So the kids learn to go to the new scoutmaster and ask him all the questions. And then in 6 months, if they want me to come back, I can still hang out do the campouts or do the Eagle Scout stuff. but I'm not the boss, right? So
Mhm.
they can tell me what to do and I don't have to tell them what to do. So I'll
Yeah.
be an assistant. So I'll still do the stuff with the scouts if they want me to do stuff. I'm sure I will. But it's better they tell me what to do rather than me tell them what to do. 20 something years of that was long enough.
Yeah.
So yeah, Boy Scouts still takes time. Maybe January I'll start that back up again. I work on around the house. I work on cars. I like to fix cars. So if you have older cars, there's always something to fix. Uh, I'll have neighbors will ask me to help fix their cars. So I'll help fix their stuff too. Jordan has his girlfriend Kat. She always has problems with her car, so I have to go fix her car. Jordan will have problems with his car, so I have to help fix his car. So yeah, that keeps me busy on the weekends. And then yeah, so there's always something,
What's your
always something
verdict?
to do.
Yeah.
What's that?
What's your verdict on Pluto? Is it a planet?
Pluto, not a planet.
Why is it
Right?
not?
I say not a planet because uh, it. I think it's just an asteroid that happened to get captured. Because the problem is if Pluto's a planet, then there's
Mhm.
thousands of other ones just like Pluto that are a little bit smaller than Pluto that you have to call planets too, and then it just never goes anywhere. So I think Pluto is small enough where it probably was captured asteroid, and all like the thousands of other asteroids that are orbiting around the Earth. We just happened to are finding them now that we didn't know back then. So Neptune, I think we'll call the last one, and Pluto is the first uh, non-planet orbiting body, and the largest non-planet orbiting body. So we don't have to keep on adding more planets. There'll also be 1,000 planets. Then it gets complicated.
Yeah. So of the projects that not the ones that you're currently working on, but the projects that you have worked on that are completed and in orbit, doing
Mm-hmm.
whatever they do, what is the one that you're most proud of and why?
Let's see. Uh, I would say Hubble telescope was probably the one I like the most proud of because it actually works and it's been around for a real long time and it gets real good science and people all know about Hubble telescope. I
Yeah.
mean, some of the other satellites were like Solar Dynamic Observatory. People don't know SDO. There was a cool program, and I really liked the program. And you get pictures from it. The picture you see from the high definition pictures of the sun you see all the time that came from SDO, but no one knows it really unless you're a scientist. But everyone knows Hubble telescope. So if
Yeah.
I did nothing but these esoteric satellites that do great science that no one's ever heard of because only scientists cared about it, it may be high tech, but I think it's important to work on something that people instantly recognize. It's like, oh, you worked on Hubble telescope, or oh, you worked on James Webb telescope, or you worked on this. When they say, oh, you were the one that worked on Discover, and they'll say, no one knows Discover, right? So that's why I like the ones that are in the common that
Yeah.
everyone in the country knows what it is.
Okay. Finally, my last question for you is if you could go back in time and meet yourself as like a kid, whether that be like if you were in middle school or in high school, or even if you were in elementary school, what would you tell yourself? Or like what piece of advice would you tell yourself?
Mhm. When I was a kid, I was shy, more shy. I'm not shy now, but I was back then. And the problem is when you're shy, you don't you don't stick up for yourself. Uh, I tell the boys and Boy Scouts, you have to be your own advocate because no
Mhm.
one's going to care what happens to you in life other than your parents. Professors don't care, your bosses don't care. These professors, if you don't get a good grade, they fail you. They don't care, right? You're just one out of a million people they see. So if
Mhm.
you think that everyone else is going to go around you to take care of you, like in high school, your teachers always try to give you good grades, right? They just want you to get out of their class, graduate, go to the next class. They try hard, uh, but the rest of your life, no one's going to care, right? So if you don't advocate for your own self sometimes you're going to get screwed with something, or someone's going to forget that you exist, or forget that they gave something to someone else because they just forgot about something. If you don't go in and say, "Hey, you forgot about me," or "Hey, I was supposed to do that," you're gonna get screwed over. And as a kid, sometimes you get screwed over because you're not the one that talks. And the quiet ones never get people say the early bird gets the worm, and other people say the squeaky wheel gets the grease,
Mhm.
right? If you're shy, you get passed by the wayside. And the shy ones may be smarter than everybody else. They may have the best brains, and they may really have good ideas. But if they don't uh, enunciate and they don't say what's going on, it's just going to stay in their brain. And I feel sorry for those kids because I have seen some really, really bright kids. And I was probably a really, really bright kid too when I was younger, but I was shy. So I wouldn't say anything. And I probably would have, I turned out okay, but I think I would have turned out better, if I learned to speak up. So to me, be your own advocate is the thing that I wish I would tell myself if I was younger.
Well, to me, you're my favorite uncle. That's no secret. So,
Well, thank you very much.
well, I'm gonna end the recording.